Two of the biggest, trust me, bro, just trust me, that Christians like to claim as a checkmate to the historicity and the truth of Jesus happens with in Matthew and in First Corinthians. The first one in Matthew is when it is claimed in Matthew that, hey, when Jesus was resurrected, the graves gave up hundreds of their dead. It doesn't say a specific number, but it suggests that 500 plus zombies are walking around Jerusalem of the old saints of who had all died in Jerusalem. They rose up. Nowhere else did they rise up. They didn't rise up in any of the other cities, but just in Jerusalem. Matthew is the only gospel that makes this claim. The other one is in First Corinthians when Paul suggests that, oh, hey, you know what? 500 people, gave a very specific number. 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus in the sky. Again, it is only written in First Corinthians. You would think this checkmate of Paul would have been written in the other letters saying, hey, you people over there in Galatians, you people over there in Corinth, you people in Jerusalem, you people in Rome, guess what they saw in Corinthia? They saw Jesus, 500 people. Let me tell you who those people were, because Paul claims that some of them were still alive at that time frame. Now, this is written decades after the so-called event, but yet Paul doesn't name not one person who can verify and validate that these people saw Jesus in the sky after he had resurrected. So neither one of them are written in any other places within the Bible. Acts does not talk about this. The other Gospels doesn't talk about zombies walking around in Jerusalem. You would think that if the apostles were all in Jerusalem, that they would have written about it, but yet not one does. And with all the Roman historians that were walking around with some walk around money in Jerusalem and Judea at that time frame, not one of them wrote about the 500 zombies. Even historians like Josephus would have made comment about that one time. Remember that one time when 500 or hundreds of the saints who had died in Jerusalem were walking around? Never once does any historian validate this claim. In the same way, if a mass hallucination had happened in Corinth, then no other historian writes about this. No other politician, the governor, the Roman governor of Corinth, no one writes about it. No other church bishops in Corinth writes about the so-called 500 people seeing this Jesus in the sky. This is a serious just judgment. For real, it happened. But there's no validation to any of these things happening. You would think that when Luke was writing the Acts and when he mentioned Paul and talking about how Paul met Jesus on the road to Damascus, to which Paul never talks about in any of his letters, that Luke, doing his great accounting and investigating of these happenings of Jesus, he never mentions the fact that Paul claims that there were 500 people that saw Jesus in the sky. That would seem like a big deal. But the problem is that whether we're talking about in a court of law, in a debate, or in any situation, that information would be laughed out of the room. Imagine, if you will, if I proclaim that here in San Antonio, that 5,000 people saw an alien ship come down, and we saw little green men come out, and they didn't ask to be taken to our leader, but they said, we want to give you med beds so that you can heal all the people. But yet there are no med beds. And I say that these people saw it. Yes, they did. Trust me, bro, for real. They saw it. But I don't give you a list of anybody else that you can go and investigate and say, okay, he claimed that his neighbor Rob saw it. He claimed that his neighbor, Mr. Evans, saw it. He claimed that his these other people over at Cigar International, that Ray over at Cigar International, he saw it. I don't give you any names, but I just say, trust me, it happened. Would you believe it? Or would you say these are the lies of one person? We have hundreds of people who claim that they've seen Bigfoot, but we ask for other additional accounts of people who were with you. We ask for video or some other type of validation that you saw Bigfoot. Those who constantly claim they see the Loch Ness Monster. We ask for proof that they saw the Loch Ness monster, but yet you don't believe it. Why not? They said what they said. So shouldn't you not believe it? But Jesus gets a pass. Why? Because you believe in Jesus and you want to believe in Jesus. So apologists and Christian believers or Bible believers love to run that one up the flagpole as if that's a winner chicken dinner. But every time it is easily debunked by the fact that there is absolutely no proof. You just have to trust me, bro. That's what happened. And that's proof. That is so far from proof. That is the biggest hearsay, the biggest con game that you could possibly imagine of people making claims that are completely false. Remember, for those who say the Bible is inerrant and is inspired by God, that in the oldest versions of Mark, it originally ended with, and the tomb was empty. It wasn't until later church fathers decided that since the other gospels had these ending stories, that Mark should also have an additional ending story of what happened with the apostles and who came to the tomb and who was there. Was the angel inside? Was it outside? Did the rock roll away beforehand? Did the rock roll away at that time frame? How much linen was left there? Where they're going to meet? Later church fathers wrote that. And it's as if they wrote it without knowledge of what the other stories say, because they differ from the other stories. And because it was written afterwards, many Christians like to say that, oh, well, this is just a different perspective that people saw it. Or how about somebody just made the story up because it's not part of the oldest text of Mark that we have. So these whole stories of 500 people seeing Jesus in the sky in Corinth, no one else wrote about it. The zombies walking around Jerusalem, which is only mentioned in Matthew. Come on. Do you think the other apostles would have missed that one? Would not have seen that one? Would not have heard of that one? Paul doesn't mention it in any of his letters. You don't think Paul would have mentioned it in some of his letters? And yes, we know First Corinthians is possibly written by someone who was a follower of Paul and not actually Paul. So, what do you guys think? Did 500 people see Jesus? Were there zombies walking around Jerusalem? All evidence point to the contrary. Y'all have a great day. And always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.